Hello, everyone. Welcome to our very special episode on understanding Urticaria. We have been staying indoors for a few months now, trying to stay safe in the times of a global pandemic. But the world around us does not stop. October 1st is globally observed as the World Urticaria Day, the annual awareness day for patients suffering from urticaria. This is the very first episode of the Autocareer Summit conducted by Sanofi India in partnership with the IHW Council to raise awareness about urticaria on a global level. With every passing day, we are learning more about the COVID-19 virus. One such important discovery is that the COVID-19 virus affects various parts of the body beyond the lungs, which also includes the skin. We have with us Professor Maurer, Director of Research at the Department of Dermatology and Allergy, and the Allergy Associate Director of the Allergy Zentrum Charité from Berlin, Germany, who is joining us to shed more light on urticaria. I'm Anisha Nair-Dhawan, your host for the day, and I look forward to learning more about urticaria through this interaction. Today's webinar will bring to light the symptoms, the management and treatment of urticaria. We'll also talk about how this affects the quality of life of patients. So let's jump in, and I'll start off by introducing our esteemed guest for the day. Professor Marcus Maurer is currently the Professor of Dermatology and Allergy, as well as the Director of Research at the Department of Dermatology and Allergy. He has authored research in more than 540 publications in peer-reviewed journals, 46 books, and book chapters. He's also the founder of the World Urticaria Day. Thank you so much, Professor Marcus, for being with us here today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for celebrating this global event, Urticaria Day. I'm very happy to be on board.
So, Professor Marcus, let's start. And at the outset, can you tell us a little bit about urticaria? How does any patient recognize that he has urticaria?
Look, most of us will get urticaria at one point in their lives, and it will be a short episode of a few days, sometimes a few weeks of wheals, like you touch a stinging nettle or a jellyfish or a mosquito bite even is comparable, or swellings of the lip or the eye, of the hand, of the feet. This usually goes away. And we speak of acute urticaria. Can be very frightening, can be very bothersome, but goes away by itself. The trouble begins when this all continues to go on for more than 6 weeks, because then we call it chronic urticaria. And that's not rare. 1 in 100 people have chronic urticaria today, and they have to be ready to deal with this disease for several years, sometimes decades.
So you said one is an acute episode, which most likely many of us will get in our lifetime, but it goes away. And the chronic one, you said, could last over a period of time and stay on for years. Does that mean that I have warts and itching skin for years at an end together?
Unfortunately, yes. So in most patients who have this chronic form, the wheals, and you have to imagine this is 10, 50, sometimes 100 wheals per day. They come every day or almost every day. And most of these patients, in addition to the wheals, develop these swellings, deep swellings. So the whole lip swells or the eye swells. They can last for several days at a time. The wheals usually go away, the individual ones, after a couple of hours. The problem is that they keep coming and they keep coming. And you don't know when this will happen again. You don't know if you wake up the next morning with a swollen lip and hundreds of wheals on your body. So it's not just the itch of the wheals and the pain that comes with the swelling. It's also the unpredictability that you don't know when this will come. And patients tell me it always comes at the wrong time. You're in a meeting, you want to go to a party. It is a devastating disease to have and really, really bothersome.
All right. For the patient who's living through this and the chronic episodes that you're talking about, you just said you don't know when it's coming. So, how do you plan your life? How do you live your life? What's left for the quality of your life?
It's very difficult. You know, we speak of quality of life and we mean how we function at work, how we interact with our partners, our kids, our parents, how we enjoy life. And this all falls away for most urticaria patients. They stop doing fun things. They are ill-mooded. They get frustrated. They don't know what to eat, so they stop eating. They don't go out because they are afraid of looking like a monster, they tell me, because of the swellings and the wheals. So really every aspect, from clothing to mood to functioning to just planning your life, vacation, careers, is affected by this disease. And if you want some stories, I'll be happy to tell you some stories, because patients really come to me devastated, saying, you have to do something because I cannot go on to live like this.
Mm-hmm. So now that you have elaborated on how the quality of life is affected, can you tell us when it happens the case of chronic urticaria, does it appear in particular parts of the body? Is there a typical time period for which the warts are there? How does it really manifest itself for patients?
So you have to imagine that all of a sudden, and without any mosquitoes being there, you suddenly develop 50, 100 mosquito bites out of the blue. This is why we call it chronic spontaneous urticaria. There are some forms where the wheals are induced by contact with external triggers. There's cold urticaria, where touching something cold will make you get a wheal or an angioedema at the site where you touch the cold. But chronic spontaneous urticaria, which is 2 out of 3 cases of chronic urticaria, is one thing above all: unpredictable. I have patients who tell me it comes every night. I have other patients who tell me, I wake up every morning with these stupid hives. I have kids 3 years old. I have 93 years old. More women than, and there's nothing that I haven't seen in urticaria. Patients who start to have this and then all of a sudden it stops and then it comes back. It's this unpredictability that's a major part of the frustration this disease brings to patients.
So the way you describe it, it seems that urticaria has quite a disruptive effect on people's lives. In fact, some studies say that the degree to which the quality of life gets impaired for those who suffer from chronic urticaria is comparable to the coronary artery disease. Would you agree, or do you think this is too extreme?
Absolutely. In my experience, this is a devastating disease. It often comes with depression. 30% of patients have manifest depression, need treatment for the depression. It comes with anxiety and frustration. Again, 30% need to see a doctor for their anxiety, because the longer you have this, the higher the risk that you develop these psychosocial problems from the disease. But that's not all. There's a high rate of divorce. There's a high rate of losing your job. There's a high rate of underperforming in school and at the workplace. I know patients who've had to stop going to school because they couldn't deal with it. They were itchy all the time. They didn't want to be exposed to the looks and the stigma that these lesions bring with them. Devastating disease, clearly one of the worst ones you can pick if you choose to have an allergy or skin disease or any other chronic disease.
Right. So, Professor Marcus, you said that sometimes, even in chronic patients, there is an event trigger. Something triggers this to come, and many times it just comes without any warning. If I know there is a particular trigger or an event, can I avoid it, and hence just avoid these chronic episodes that happen one after the other?
Many patients have this question, and unfortunately, I have to say yes and no to this question. There are triggers that can be avoided. Look, some patients say when I drink alcohol, it gets worse. Some patients say when I'm stressed, it gets worse. And, that's where the problem starts. I cannot prescribe a less stressful life. No, I can say, please work on your stress, and that may help. And then there are triggers where you can't do anything. Look, we're in the middle of a pandemic, a viral infection that is troubling the world. Imagine what that does to patients with chronic urticaria, where we know that one of the most significant and relevant triggers in chronic urticaria getting worse is a viral infection. Every fall is the sickness season here in Germany. Every fall, I have a mountain of chronic urticaria patients coming in to say, look, it was okay for the beginning of the year, but now it's gotten really worse. And we know that COVID-19 makes chronic urticaria patients get worse. We have numbers now from the global network where 40% of all patients with chronic urticaria who get infected show exacerbation. And in those who are hospitalized for COVID-19, it's more than 70%. So that's a relevant trigger that you unfortunately can only avoid to some extent. No?
So what would you suggest are effective ways to manage urticaria? And is this an allergy? Is this something else?
That's a really good question, because most patients come to me and they say, doctor, you need to make me an allergy test. Because if you find what I am allergic to, then I can stop eating that, or I can stop being exposed to that in my life. And that's just not true. Chronic urticaria is not an allergy. So it doesn't have anything to do with what is around you. It has something to do with a disease that is inside yourself. It's an autoimmune disease. And what that means is that you need good help. You need good treatment for as long as it takes for chronic urticaria to go away. Because it does. After a couple of years or longer, it will stop. And the idea is, the strategy is to take medication that protects you as a urticaria patient from having the wheals, from having the itch, from having the angioedema, so that, well, you forget to have the disease until you forget to take your medication.
All right. So what are the available treatment and the options that are available to patients who have chronic urticaria?
The main message here is we have many. So I think patients who are right now out there frustrated with what they have, they should go and see a doctor. That is important because in my country, when we did a big online survey, 40% of all patients with chronic urticaria had given up on their doctors, are just staying at home and suffering in silence. That's not good. So go see a doctor. Doctors know about this disease. They can help you to treat it. And when you start to treat, you have to talk with your doctor about the aim. What do we want to achieve with the treatment? And the aim is to get you free of signs and symptoms. No wheals, no itch, no angioedema. And this only works if you use medication to prevent the signs and symptoms of urticaria. There's no use in taking an antihistamine tablet when you have wheals to make them go away. That's not the idea. The idea is to take them every day so that you stop getting these problems. And when you do that, you have a high chance with a modern, non-sedating, non-tired-making antihistamine to stop this disease in its tracks, to prevent new wheals, new angioedema, new itch from happening.
All right. You just said that this is an autoimmune problem. Chronic urticaria is an autoimmune problem. Then why are we taking antihistamines to prevent it from coming on? Is this an allergy or is this an autoimmune problem?
Your questions are excellent. I'm very happy you're asking this. Look, this is actually a very special form of autoimmunity. We sometimes call it autoallergy. What that means is that the body reacts to things inside like they were allergens. And the consequence of this is that we have the same system, the same cells in the skin, the same proteins that are involved in this reaction. The cells are called mast cells. The proteins that make you itchy are called histamine and others. They play a role in true allergies like allergic rhinitis and asthma, and in chronic urticaria. So these drugs help in both of these diseases. They block what is making your skin break out in hives, makes them wheelie, makes them swell, and causes the itch.
All right. So you're saying the way the disease is manifesting within your body, the way your immune system is reacting to this, it is like the way it is during an allergy. You also mentioned that there are many ways to treat, and for that you need to have a good relationship with your doctor to understand how to manage it best. So, what is the importance of this relationship that you have with your doctor, and what are the other options that may be available?
Look, it is very important what you're saying. You need to make your doctor understand what it is like for you. And, when I see patients and they come to my office, oftentimes they don't have wheals. This is a fluctuating disease. Sometimes you have the wheals, and the next time you don't. Even on the same day, there are hours when you have hundreds of wheals, and there are hours where you have no wheals. So two tips. Show your doctor pictures of yourself. I know this is not nice because you feel stupid because you have all these wheals and a swollen lip, but your doctor needs to see that, especially when you have no symptoms at the time when you talk to her or him. So that's a very important thing for doctor to understand, that you really have this disease and what it looks like when you have the symptoms. The second tip is keep a diary. For yourself, use either something that you can download on the internet, the Urticaria activity score, or other instruments, or just make a simple diary where you write down every day, did you have wheals? Did you have swelling? Did you have itch? Did you take your medication? So that you can keep track. No, the idea is that you're looking at how well your treatment works, and if it doesn't work, or not as well as you want it to work, well, then we step it up. We want to treat the disease until it is gone. That's the overall approach. But we also want to use only as much as is needed and as little as possible. That's the whole trick about treating urticaria. Help your doctor to understand what you have and how bad it is, and how well the treatment works, so that you can adapt, optimize the approach of treating your urticaria.
Right. So what you're saying is the doctor will decide what is going to work best for a particular patient, but in most cases, this is a long-term treatment, right? You want to prevent them from coming on. For that, you need to take some medication that will keep your body in a state of calm.
Absolutely. So this medication needs to be two things. It needs to work, otherwise it's not good, and it needs to be safe. You have to be ready to take these tablets for a year, for 3 years, for 5 years, for 10 years, for 15 years. No one knows how long your urticaria will last before it stops. We know the average, 5 to 7 years, but for the individual patients, we cannot predict. That's why we work with antihistamines, for example, that are safe, even if you take them 10, 20, 30 years, and that work. And look, if it doesn't work the first time, don't give up, because we have a step-up scheme in our head. Your physician has a plan, a roadmap. You need to tell her or him that the treatment that she or he prescribed didn't work, because that means that we go to the next step. And the next step could be as simple as just doubling the dose, or taking 4 tablets of that antihistamine per day. So work with your doctor to let them know how well the treatment works. You got to be ready to do this for a long time. But the good thing is, once you get to the point where you have complete control, no more urticaria problems, then you have something that you can do for years until you lose the disease.
Forever.
Correct. Forever.
All right. So, Professor Marcus, if there is a simple way of taking oral medication over the longer term to keep this problem at bay, where do patients falter? Do they forget to take the medicines regularly? Are they afraid of some kind of side effects of taking these kind of medicines over the long term? What derails their plan?
Look, my experience is that patients who experience that the treatment works stick with this treatment, because finally this is gone, this is under control. Yes, patients forget to stop taking your tablets for 2 or 3 days, everything will come back if you still have the disease. So you take the tablets again. And my recommendation is always, don't do that. No, keep Keep ahead of urticaria, otherwise you'll be trailing. Now, we said the disease will go away by itself. That's true. What if you have medication and you have no more wheals, no more angioedema? Wouldn't you wonder after maybe 3 months or 6 months if you still have the disease? And that's a fair point. Yes, then we do something that we call a pill holiday. So for 1 week or 2 weeks, we stop the pills to see if they're still needed. But if during this time the wheals come back, we start immediately to bring this prophylaxis back to patients. And that's something that works really well. One more point, Anisha. Every once in a while, I see a patient who comes back to me and she says, look, this was great. Now it's fine. I'm back to where I was before this whole stupid disease started. But after 6 months or 8 months now, occasionally I do have symptoms again. I think my antihistamine has stopped working. No, that doesn't happen. You cannot get used to or dependent on antihistamines. What happens is that maybe something in your environment, stress, a viral infection, something in your environment is acting on the disease and increasing the disease activity. So what's the plan? Increase the treatment to keep up with the disease activity and bring it under control again.
Right. Professor Marcus, you've come up with the concept of the Urticaria Day. So can you share with us what led you to do this? What was the inspiration behind this? And what's the theme for the Autocareer Day 2020?
Well, Urticaria Day was very much needed. I work with a team here in Berlin. We see thousands of patients with chronic urticaria, and patients come in and 80% that we need to bring effective treatment to patients. And this is how we started it, that we need to bring effective treatment to patients. And this is how we started Urticaria Day, and it's been going on for some years. It's growing every year. And if you go to www.urticariaday.org, you will see all the wonderful things that happen around the world. Patient lectures, interview, radio, newspapers, flash mobs in the city. There is so many different things that are being done in India, in Asia, all across the world. For UCARE, UCARE, Urticaria Centers of Reference and Excellence. And that's a network that has grown over the last 4 years, 110 centers across the globe in more than 40 countries. We have these centers of reference and excellence. Go check them out. Maybe you live as a urticaria patient close to one, you will certainly get help there. Or it is a place for your doctor to get in touch with if they need a second opinion or help in your treatment. UCARE. That should be what we do for patients with urticaria, and that should be what urticaria patients do for themselves. Don't give up. Do not give up. There's hope out there. There's treatment out there. There's a light at the end of that tunnel that may seem so dark and so devastating to you now.
Right. Professor Marcus, you started getting a few questions on our Facebook page, and one of the users is asking, which food is not allowed if you're suffering from chronic urticaria?
Chronic urticaria patients can eat everything. Let me say that again. There's no food that is forbidden. We have some patients who recognize that certain foods make things worse, but that's always on an individual basis. There's not one food or one drink that you cannot drink as a urticaria patient. And I say that so loud and so often because this is a common misconception, and many patients come to me and they live on potatoes and rice, because they say, I fear that from all that I read on the internet, this could all make my urticaria worse. Well, it doesn't. Your treatment, once it works, will allow you to eat and drink everything. It is controller treatment, so it controls even the things that may come from the outside and act on your urticaria.
Right. Another question is, and you've also mentioned this, why are women more prone to hives?
It's a very interesting question and scientifically unanswered. We have some ideas. Many autoimmune diseases are more common in women. So it's not an exception. It's not a big surprise, but it's still not a good answer, I know. So one of the things is that hormones, sex hormones, female sexual hormones, act on the system being mast cells who release histamine, who go to the blood vessels and the nerves and cause these reactions. These hormone receptors sit on the mast cell. So the hormones tell the mast cells to do things, and they are unfortunately encouraging mast cells to do things. And when they do what they do, they set free the histamine. That's when the problem starts. That's when the wheals come. That's when the itch comes. So this is why some women, not all, see a relation between their disease activity and their menstrual cycle. There's some connection to becoming pregnant. And once you hit menopause, it stops. Then you have a 50-50. Then male and female patients are equal. Same before puberty. So clearly these hormones act on the system, but we don't quite know yet how they do that.
All right. Another user is asking, my urticaria symptoms are severe in the evening. Any reason for this?
Yes, I hear that a lot. But like we talked about before, there are other patients who say they're most severe in the mornings. Now, the evening patients, and I know many of them, they tell me, I come home from work, everything falls away, and then here come my hives, here come my wheals. I'm sitting on the sofa or I'm enjoying dinner with my family, and here it starts. That could have 1, 2, 3 reasons. One of it could be that, all the distraction falls away and you realize that the hives are there where maybe during the day you don't focus on them so much. I don't think that's a very good explanation. I think it has more to do with the circadian clock. What's that? Our body works in different ways during different times of the day. In the early morning, you make a lot of cortisol. Your brain makes a lot of cortisone, and so you have more of these suppressing levels of cortisone in the mornings. Okay, that could be an explanation. Bottom line is we don't know, and it's just as bad in the evening as it is at night when you're in your bed and you really want to go to sleep or stay asleep, and here are the wheals, here is the itch. And you can't go to sleep or stay asleep.
Professor Mark Stewart mentioned this earlier in our talk that sometimes a viral infection will bring on the symptoms of urticaria. Those who have chronic urticaria in some patients. Now, what is the data suggesting when it comes to COVID-19? Now, COVID-19 is a pandemic. It's global. It's around the world. You mentioned that those patients who are admitted in hospital with COVID and who had previous episodes of urticaria will, 70% of them will have it again. So, is it before? It is always after, I get the virus. Will it happen? Could it be that, I break out into hives and, it is perhaps one of the symptoms of me having caught the virus? Is it before or after? How does it work?
So we have to distinguish 2 things. Number one, COVID, SARS-CoV-2 virus, can make you have acute urticaria. So when you get the infection, for the first time in your life, you start to develop wheals. That's very well known. This is true for many viruses around the world where the wheals come for the duration of the infection, and then the infection stops and the wheel stops. And sometimes this has something to do with the drugs that we take for the viral infection. We take aspirin, we take ibuprofen because we have a headache and we have a fever. And these drugs, aspirin, ibuprofen, diclofenac, they are drugs that are known to make people have acute urticaria. So it's a combination of 2 things: the virus that activates the mast cells and the drugs that we take against the virus that make us have acute urticaria. But this is acute urticaria. Here, the wheals come with the infection and they go with the infection. The bigger problem is chronic spontaneous urticaria. Again, you have chronic spontaneous urticaria, you get the viral infection, and your chronic spontaneous urticaria blows up. Instead of 10 wheals per day, now you have 500. Instead of one angioedema, you have 3. And this increase in disease activity is really what troubles patients, also patients with COVID-19, because, well, you need to treat, you need to step up your treatment, but at the same time, you're isolated, you're in quarantine, so that makes it very troubling for patients. And as we have learned, stress is not a good thing for a patient with chronic urticaria. So it all comes together, troubling our patients. And this recent study that I talked about, performed by Emre Koçaturk from Turkey in more than 90 U-cares around the globe, really showed that this is a very common trigger. COVID is a very common trigger for patients with chronic urticaria to have increased disease activity.
Right. We have another Facebook user who's asking a question. Can urticaria cure itself after the long term? Now,
Yes.
and I mean, cure itself, but in the interim, what should patients be doing? Taking the medicines, right?
Thank you for this wonderful question, because we cannot cure it in the sense that we can make it go away. No, we can cure an infection by giving an antibiotic, but we can't cure chronic urticaria the same way. We can treat it so that patients forget that they have it, yes, but we can so far not cure it. And this is why it's so important for patients to know that it cures itself, always. It takes a couple of years in most patients, but it will go away. Now, once we figure out how the body does that, we can help the body to do it faster. We can push this stop of urticaria, but we're not there yet. We need a little bit more research until we understand why chronic urticaria at one point decides to go away, and then hopefully we can use that mechanism and our understanding of why and how that happens to make it to make a cure for chronic urticaria.
Right. Professor Marcus, I'm going to take one last question, and this is a little technical. It's come from a user, and I'm not completely understanding the question. I'm going to read it out to you, and perhaps you can explain what the question means and give us the answer. So the question is, what is the role of immune hypersensitivity in the pathophysiology of acute urticaria?
Okay, it is a very special question, but it's a great question. When you have an allergy, allergic rhinitis, for example, your doctor may recommend to you to do specific immunotherapy. This is what the question is about. What does that mean? It means that we're giving the allergen to which you have the allergy in small doses, either into the skin or under the tongue, so that we induce tolerance, that we make you non-allergic to this allergen. And this works. It works in allergic rhinitis. It works in food allergy, for example. But we've learned chronic urticaria is not an allergy. So you cannot desensitize patients, tolerize patients to allergens from the environment. The thinking is, when we understand to what patients with chronic urticaria are allergic to in their own body, then maybe we can use these proteins to give them to the patient so that the immune system of the patient starts to develop tolerance and gets desensitized. These are things that are currently being looked at in clinical studies. So it's not science fiction. It is a very good question, but you have to rethink, because we won't be using allergens. We will be using the patient's own body to make the immune system tolerate this part of his body again.
Okay, so I guess more research and more work is required in this department. Professor Marcus, thank you so much for joining us today and explaining to us what chronic urticaria does to patients and giving all of them so much hope that there is a life beyond the discomfort of urticaria. You need to take your medicines on a regular basis. You need to consult with your doctors, have a relationship with your doctors where you can understand how much of the medicine, if the protocol is working, how to change it. But there is, like you said, a light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you so much, Professor Marcus, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So that is Professor Marcus joining us all the way from Berlin to talk to us about chronic urticaria, and we will be celebrating the World Urticaria, we'll be observing the World Urticaria Day on 1st of October. Do stay tuned to the IW Council page. We have lots coming up, and if you have more questions, you type them in. We will try to get answers to these questions during the course of the next few days, and of course on 1st of October, when we will be talking more about urticaria. Thank you so much, Mr. Marcus, for joining us, and thank you all for tuning in.